implementer, not just the format, but the piece of software that came out of OpenBSD and bypasses graph and renders man pages very quickly and efficiently and in a nice elegant manner with various output formats. 2 people have heard of that? 3? Oh, come on. So the traditional question is, well, use graph. We've used graph forever. That's what people do. And graph is in C++. Graph can be slow. Graph is huge. Hey, how are you? Hi. Hey. So everyone uses graph or tries to use an heirloom nroff or something until an alternative comes along, and in the words of Ted Unings, holy crap, this is fast, holy crap, this is small, and oh wow, it has the right license, and it's written in elegant C rather than C++. So, when, what's that?
I said I take offense to that.
Oh, which part of it?
If it's elegant, it should be in C++ and not C.
Okay, well we have a vote for C++, you may rewrite it. So the same goes for SmartMon tools. Why on earth would you do anything different because everyone uses that? And that's great until you try to parse its output with all 2 choices, and I guess you can do a few flags to remove sections from its output. It does not support NVMe devices. It is rather monolithic and has a daemon that some people swear by and some people presumably swear at. So, in the era of utilities taking options like ZFS option flag saying, hey, I want this one parameter with no headers printed and that's it, give it to me. Utilities have come a long way since like top, where it's this very human readable big thing, and yes, you can do dump mode, dump you a big top output, but that's not super parsable, that's not something you can drop into a standard pipeline and say, hey, let's sort it, let's do this to it, that to it, and all that. So I would not mind a SmartMon tool replacement that, for example, is always in base. When you get a big pile of drives and it's like, well, some of these were replaced a month ago, some of these are 6 years old, just figure out which is which. Well, Smart can give you numbers of hours and other good stuff. And we can debate about it, how useful some of those counts are, but some of them have proven useful, especially with, say, Barracudas, which at about 3 years start tanking, and that becomes pretty predictable, and it's nice to have that number spit out. We can debate the accuracy of those numbers and why there are vendor flags, etc. But when we have things like ZFS that completely violate the traditional layers and they combine what would be a hardware RAID card or a software RAID layer as a block device that gets passed up to the file system, which I will comment on briefly. If you have software RAID, let's say, and 8 terabyte drives, and you need to rebuild one of those drives, you spend a very, very long time going from point A to point Z on that drive, block by block, blindly rebuilding it, rather than saying, hey, because we've combined these, we know that there's 20 gigs of data on there, let's put those blocks on the appropriate drive and move on. So in violating all these layers, something like a zpool command, if there was a library, as Sarai touched on, what if the ZFS commands could simply build against that library, in addition to saying drive status online, a few basic things like temperature, smart status, even if it's binary, passes, fails, etc., etc. I've been doing 3 years of FreeNAS recovery. I see broken ZFS more than I see working ZFS and related systems. I will say that most issues are user configuration issues and poor choices, rather than strictly it breaking for no apparent reason, or the mythical bit rot that happened to be on your space map, and blah, 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 blah. So I find that information very useful, especially in an era where, thanks to open source, the motherboard, the disk controller HBA, the disks, the partitioning, the file systems all come from, shall we say, different vendors, but they are all your problem. All the software stuff is your problem. You don't talk to 2 different vendors that point fingers at each other and spit at each other, etc. So with an operating system like FreeBSD, you actually get a partitioning tool. You don't download something or go buy something to partition it. You don't have a special ZFS thing you bought that you did the file system part with. And if there's any question about the interaction between these, such as smart data passing through an HBA, it's your problem with opportunities presented to you, such as the SES util that just came up, which is, hey, what drive identification in a rack of drives, or in a shelf of drives, is that accurate? And it's like, hey, a standard to say, go blink this, whereas smart, get this, is a standard to say, hey, hi drive, how are you? Tell me something, I don't know, and it talks back to you. Doing support, I get bin sh and vi at my disposal. That's all I can count on. So having tools like these in base are very useful. I would love to see, say, the BSDs have a DD that's more like DD rescue, which is in ports. That's a quick thing to go on there, which allows you to do a proper skipping of bad sections on a disk when you rip off data to, say, a file on ZFS that you can perform your recovery on, yet roll back, which is very cool, and try again. It also does retries, something that you don't do in ZFS, and maybe crazy you could script it in some crazy way, but that's not so hot. Having the sleuth kit, that's in ports, that's another set of tools to just provide a little more information about disks and all that. Let's see, OpenBSD has ATA control, which is a very basic smart type utility that spits stuff out, and it was imported from NetBSD and no one sat down and thought about the problem. It doesn't check to see if smart is available before it starts throwing smart commands at the disk. That's not good. It just makes assumptions and rolls with it. It has hard-coded, I think, actual ATA commands just throughout the software that really should be in a header. And then going down my long list of smart available tools, I didn't find many others. Maybe there's some proprietary ones, and maybe you can point me to some, but we have a very simplistic, kind of broken, primitive NetBSD, OpenBSD implementation. We have a few things out of FreeBSD. I believe it's cam control. You can throw identify at it. You've got the command CMD command, which allows you to throw flags at it and have things bounce back at you, which is kind of cool. Thank you, Alexander Moten, for posting the one example of how to use it, and every other example on the internet is that one repeated by people. So good for him. I appreciate that. I'm like, oh, there's got to be more. Here's this nifty opportunity to throw commands at a drive and actually hopefully learn something, but no one's been doing it. So maybe one could hand roll something with that, and at least it's in base and it's there. But here and now, we have SmartMon tools, which is a big beast. It's missing modern things like NVMe. It maybe will support it, maybe not. Granted, it has a very rich drive library, but some of that might be in a standard format that one could arguably legally say, hey, here's just data that gets safely translated to another format. I would have to talk to a lawyer about that. And onward. So this also background, I've done a little bit with this Beehive thing. I worked with Peter and Neil to get it in FreeBSD 10 rather than 11, 12, or 13, whenever it would show up, because it wasn't moving very quick at the time. Only now have people like GNN discovered Beehive, and like, wow, this is great, thank you. I'm so glad you discovered it finally. So what does smart data mean to a virtual machine? If you are at Amazon, which I'm pretty sure is not using ZFS, and you have a virtual machine on Amazon, do you have a right to know the health of your backing store? Do you have a right to know the redundancy of your backing store? If it's RAID Z3, do you have the right to know if one disk out of 2 of 3 available to fail is down and you're really not yet in a dire situation? From that perspective, there's a whole notion of that's a cattle car service. You should not know anything. You are one what's a good term, one tenant among many. Or if you're NASA and you say, this virtual machine actually has the right to move itself based on the safety of its backing store, let's get at that information somehow. Would that information be consolidated and fed into the virt.io device, which Peter says would not be too difficult? Smart's pretty darn simple, believe it or not, and that information, if available, could be fed in. Well, if it's a VM on one disk, great, you pass it through. If it's on multiple disks, do you choose the worst data? Or do you feed it line by line an output of all the available disks backing that VM because, well, let it decide if it cares. So then, okay, a lot of people run Xen server with, say, NFS backing with a file device backing it. Should there be any little injection of smart-ish data so that that VM has a right to know the quality of its backing store? Because in doing support, I found that anything from motherboard on up can break. If it's there, it can break. And the more you know about each component in that stack of stuff, the better. So at least one of you have put thought into this, and I'd love to hear your ideas or questions on just the whole problem or what inspired you, Sarai, to say something.
Well, mine was more improve smart controls rather than replace it, because I'm actually trying to make a Python wrapper around it, and in doing so, I found that I couldn't cyclize it because there is no library for smart controls.
There's no what?
There's no library.
Correct, no library for smart mount tool, it's just the thing.
Somewhere, whole big blob. And if you, for example, just want to get temperatures, you could either go the raw temperature way, the SCSI way, or the Atacam way, and you could do that. But then I found various different manufacturers report temperature in different ways, which is very annoying.
Yep.
They break standard, but you can't pull their necks and say, why are you breaking standard? But Smart Mount Tools takes that and, like, say some drives report temperature multiplied by 10, and then it does all the dirty work for you. So it would be nice if it did the dirty work in a nice way. And then if it had a library, you could just make those particular calls instead of calling smartcuttle-a, which takes...
Parse the heck out of it.
Yeah, and in parsing that, like, I'm actually currently, just right now, trying to reduce this sub-process call time, and it's like, on a multi-part device, it's about 7 seconds.
Okay,
If you have
7 seconds
if
to
you
parse.
have 200 drives, multiply that by 7 seconds, it's nearly 24 minutes.
I think part of that is because you want to execution. You can actually use the command in power.
Yes, but still 7 seconds is horrendous.
Not necessary. Because you can use the command to multiple drives at one time. So
Yes, but a single one, 7 seconds to just get temperature is...
yeah, so you just don't get real-time response.
Then Lee is saying, why would you take 7 and multiply it by the number of drives?
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm just saying, that, I gave that as an example, but, okay.
But I
let's say-
think your point is that even if you them all in parallel, the fact that it takes 7 seconds to get 200 drives is still work.
If you have 200 drives, I
I
don't
think
think
you want
7
to make
seconds is a problem. I have other problems.
Plug in for temperature.
Like 5 milliseconds though.
Think about it.
Temperature,
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't
You
really matter.
can afford to have 7 seconds delay for your data collection.
Okay, but
And the
that,
emptiness on the drive.
we're still trying to work around the problem, not solve it.
Yeah, so ideally it should be.
I'm kind of patient though, I see
Does
Do it every day,
all the
7 seconds.
entries and then you wait for the.
Look at the cache, the value.
The drive feedback.
Sure,
But I,
yes, we can do a lot of smart things on our side, but the very fact that I have to pass all the information to just get temperature in itself is a problem.
When what you'd prefer is something like a ZFS command where you can get exactly one thing in a parsable value with no headers, and that's what you need and that's what you get. Hopefully faster than 7 seconds. For what it's worth, I saw it, maybe we'll take that offline afterwards. I saw a drive that passed all tests, but it took like 30 seconds to run the smart control command. And that turned out to be the bad drive, believe it or not. So there's more to it, including the execution time and other weird available information, shall we say, that you have to know what to do with. So, okay, there's that massive parsing. Is everyone parsing their smart control output, -A or -X, and lots of either SED or awk or you name it? Devin, I'm sure you've parsed. Okay.
We just look at response latencies at a GStat and do a GStat to batch, and that's actually seems to be our best indicator because everything else sucks.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think one issue is that maybe if you have intimate knowledge of some particular vendor's drive model of how it does smart, you can maybe make useful data. But in general, if you just have some random disk you got from the store, the smart data is actually usually meaningless and useless because
Okay.
it's not consistent, it's not standardized, it's kind of worthless in a generic sense. Aside from, if your disk actually logs errors, that seems to have some correlation with the fact that it's probably going to die soon. But in my experience, the rest of the counters and stuff, unless you have some intimate knowledge about some specific model, it's otherwise kind of useless.
So about that knowledge, I would be more than happy to ignore everything under I don't know, let's say 500 gigs, all those generations of drives that started with the standard arrival.
It's still true. Yeah,
True, but it narrows the scope. I mean, there's a zillion Barracudas out there and certain key ones, and supporting a handful of popular drives really well as opposed to lots and lots, okay, I'd say is, case by case. And if it were structured nicely, one could add their own, be it sweat equity, or if they happen to be at a company under NDA, and add in their own knowledge to the commons.
And I think that the way you normally get that data is under NDA, which means you can't publish it.
Okay. Okay, well, we're within those confines, but obviously we have let me rephrase this. Okay, we could all dive into a massive contribution to SmartMon tools and get it working the way we want, but then we'll never include it in the basis of our favorite operating systems. So that sets us back. So is there a third choice that's not so obvious?
Well,
Or just ignore your smart data?
But
there are so many data that Smart can tell you that it's not really useful for diagnostic purposes. So like, if you want to identify failing drive, you probably want to measure the latency of each operation.
Okay.
And that's, well, to my experience, is much more useful than just Smart, because sometimes Smart doesn't tell you anything.
It is definitely not an end-all be-all. There's no question there at all. But is it good about temperature? Or what about hours of use?
Temperature can be useful, but I think that's the second step.
Okay.
So the first thing is to identify a drive that have the potential of failing. And that's more important for a storage system, in my opinion.
Potential through its behavior?
Yeah.
Because the latency of a
Sure.
failing drive will be significantly more than a normal drive.
Hours before Smart starts kicking stuff out, you'll see latency on reads or writes start to climb, and you'll have this baseline average, and all of a sudden, out of the middle of nowhere, it's just like, hey, we're gonna start seeing this failure, and it's about 4, 6, 8 hours, and all of a sudden that drive will die.
That's your window of opportunity?
It's not huge, but it is, there is definitely something there, and you can predict it pretty regularly using latency, but we get almost no value out of Smart.
Splatting out GStat, should that be a little more pretty formatted for parsing?
It would be really nice if there was a stats collection thing somewhere that just was a resident process.
There we usually trace for that.
Well, that's what we do, right? But it would be nice if there was a resident process where IOs that were dispatched, continually were sent to this collection daemon that would generate a histogram of what the distribution of IO latency was for reads and writes on a per device basis. And then we had something that would chew on that. That would be huge.
So the really scary thing, though, hacky thing, I know probably you're going to talk to an RC and slacking off not here from Manassas. something we talked about at the Vendor Summit was having something, Glenn is here, you're here, so I can tell you about this. We would, in some ways it would be nice if you almost had a TCP dump for a
Yeah.
SCSI perip, where you could actually get the CCBs and a TCP dump, and you'd have timestamps, and you'd have all that, and you could then look at it in Wireshark, because it's pretty easy to write a little Wireshark formatter to parse that. We just need a way to have TCP dump attached to something that's not a NetI app, which would make you happy, because then you could have net interfaces, we not have to have net interfaces for USB devices anymore.
Could you use G-Gate to do that? Pass the entire transit through another box and watch it that way?
Well, I mean, there's so much volume that you'd really want to do that. I think there's too much data to.
Come on, the NSA analyzes huge feeds.
But,
They have a budget.
yeah, I don't know if you'd want to use G-Gate for that, but just like TCP, you can pick a specific drive. And you can run a VPF filter also, you don't actually get all the CCBs, you only get certain CCBs that you want. It's not a horrific model, but that would maybe allow you to get some of that, because especially if you can actually figure out latency if you actually log growth of the CCB going out and requesting that.
Yep.
You can sync it up that way. So,
Like, for what we've seen, like that, we ended up using trace, but if there was just some resident process that like, you know, I mean, every like the IOs are there, like, and they're not huge volume, they're more in the tens to hundreds of thousands, not millions, right? Or hundreds of millions, right? Like nowhere close, but to be able to have that and just have some kind of distribution latency, like for either reads or writes.
and to be able to track things over history in general.
Well, history's something different. I just want like, you know, I would be happy with like the last minute, it just rolls every minute, right? So I can see, you know, what the distribution is, this histogram would be over like the last minute, right?
Like a SolarWinds health check.
Yeah.
But then
Just
would,
going to histogram.
would it be up to you to responding in that 8-hour or less window that, oh my gosh, this drive is likely going south? Is that an OS responsibility or a dude with script
It's
down
a
duty on?
DC ops at that point in time. So the reason I like histograms is I can say if the TP90 latency for a disk is violated over the last 48 hours, go raise an alarm.
Okay,
Just gives you a trigger point that you can then hook up to whatever monitoring escalation you.
sure.
I
Okay,
can
fair enough.
actually, if people are interested later, I can pull up on my laptop and I can actually show that.
Cool.
No, I believe you. I've heard several times that latency is one of the best predictors of the disk about the practice.
Even on SSDs.
Even, okay, cool. Any other special issues on SSDs? Are they providing more information, less on average? Treat them like disks?
Treat them like disks and hope they don't crash. That's a big issue. Bad SSDs will like, there's a little OS on the firmware there and it'll just crash. And your all IO will go to zero. You're like, what the fuck's going
You
on?
remove the box comes up and it's like,
No,
8
the
gigabyte
disk
SSD or
will
something.
restart itself, but it like takes 30 seconds for the disk to come on. Like, wait, what's going on for this like VDAV? And you go, oh, okay, get it back up.
Oh, well,
And
that's
you look at the smart, this is where actually the smart counter is useful, is the number of power cycles. This is actually a really useful correlation. Look at the IPMI restarts of chassis versus the smart control restarts of the device. And when you see the device restart count and power loss count go up and the chassis count not, you got a problem with your disk. And it's frequently a problem with the firmware or the fabrication, one of the two. But that's another actually really good indicator.
One small win for smart, okay. Other tips and tricks, because these darn disks of various forms aren't going away. I kind of wish they would, but they're here to stay. What about the idea of a virtual machine having a right to know what's under the hood in some form? Crazy idea, it should never know, it's virtual, or, well, maybe a decision needs to be made on that and it gets migrated to another machine because, hey, there's danger coming up. Because once this information is collected via different forms, let's just call it disk health, maybe it's latency, maybe it's smart, maybe it's restarts, maybe it's all that abstracted into one useful command that is easy to remember. Yes?
I don't think it's very useful for a virtual machine to know the state of the underlying.
I think so, yeah.
It's more useful for hardware. It should migrate the VM to somewhere else.
And it makes the decision. That-
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally legit.
That,
Yep.
that information belongs to the control plane.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually also saves power. Because you do it once, and that's one centralized place where you make all the decisions, and that's should be more transparent to the guests.
So the cloud is fundamentally commodity with a nice race to the bottom on cost and corners cut whenever possible to keep costs down. So that would be great if every cloud provider is extremely responsible about proper hygiene, but as a coin-operated tenant, maybe it would be nice because you're paying your bottom of the barrel rates. If you did have some insight that, oh, I should go to other coin-operated tenant and let my $5 a month run out on this one. Just thinking. Anyhow, but
If you are a guest and you're seeing that an SLA is being violated, whatever your scheduler is should be alerted, and then you should shoot yourself. Right? But you don't necessarily know, you just know that your SLA has been violated. My SLA being like, I expect this guy every 2 milliseconds.
okay.
Because
Cool.
otherwise, we're also, the guest would have to know where to migrate to. Normally that knowledge is an insight that you're part of you want the VMs to kind of be dumb in that regard. They don't want to have to know the topology of what they live on, or it's kind of one of the points.
Right, of the whole Docker disposable
Well, even if you're
livestock
using
versus pets
VPS,
world. Yes.
VPS with jails, for example, with CFS.
VPS, that's the German project that migrates in nifty ways and is so complex it will never hit base, or a different VPS?
Pretty much. It's
Okay.
yeah.
Has anyone heard from the German guy who surfaces every 6 months about VPS?
4 months ago.
4 months? That's recent.
Yeah.
What's
So
new?
we're doing two- Well, that means he will be pure showing up that results.
Yeah, right,
Well, there was some noise on Twitter. That's all I saw.
Twitter, okay.
Noise
With-
on Twitter about VPS.
Okay, well, cool. VPS might live. Anyhow, any related topics? Or, thank you, that was fun.
Something
Yes, sir.
maybe of relevance, I have reason to believe that Warner is working on a CAN front-end for NVMe.
Okay, cool. So Warner is working on CAM support for NVMe?
Like a CAM, so instead of having NVMe disks or wherever they show up, they'll actually be inside of CAM and show up as DA0 and that.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. So it just sort of takes it into Beehive, I trust?
Well, it would be a CAN interface.
Oh, so for the hardware NVM,
So NVMe is a different,
SSD on steroids.
yes.
what's the description?
SSD on steroids.
Yes, right, okay. So passed into the host OS regardless of any virtualization?
Yeah, it's a
Okay,
metal thing.
cool,
I mean,
okay.
It's independent of VMs.
Cool. Well, thank you. And we can take this separately.